Firstly, this is just my opinion because I don't have a lot of facts to back this up, but it seems like the game plan, it seems like for game plan oriented fighters like Volk, who is also adaptive, don't get me wrong, but obviously someone like Volk comes equipped with certain tools specifically tailored to deal with an opponent, right? So he has a game plan oriented strategy. He comes in to do certain things for certain opponents. But in my opinion, most of those tools, most of the time, seem to be offensive rather than defensive. So we'll delve more into that, obviously. But if you look at Volk, the same defensive habits throughout his career, and those habits, especially over the past few years, are quite consistent. And that's what got him hunted down in this fight. That's what got him TKO, not TKO, KO versus Islam Makhachev. But let's get straight into it. As implied early on, Volk's defense is pretty consistent. It's relying on a few primary things. The obvious one, number one, I would say, is footwork, distance control with the range and all of that, escape and controlling distance, and then the head movement sometimes. And then the less obvious ones are what I would call landmines, basically punishments for attempting to enter range. Like as he's backing up, he's going to try and escape Ilia coming forward with the pressure, and he obviously has that jab there. That jab, I think, is a great defensive tool in the sense that it slows down a lot of pressure from most fighters, except for Ilia. And so as he's backing up, there's a landmine, leg kick. And those leg kicks are especially effective because he's coming forward, which means his weight is on his front leg, and so that leg kick is gonna do more damage. Another part of Volk's defense that I should have mentioned wasn't necessarily offense, but the threat of offense with feints. And so he slows a lot of people down by giving them reason to think he's gonna, attack. And so in this scenario, he does a little feint, and Topuria doesn't react. He's still Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees mode, just walking forward. But then Volk is going to feint a second time, and he does a more heavy feint. He puts more of his body into it, and that time Topuria kind of stops and disengages. And so an important part of determining the trajectory of this fight was who was going to win the feint game. And we're going to look more at how this evolved throughout the fight and the roles reversed. Now here's where Ilia begins to initiate. He's doing these small little step-in feints. Here's one right here, boom. And they're getting reactions from Volk, not big reactions yet, but they're obviously doing two primary things. So one is testing the water, testing his reaction, seeing where he can go from there. And then the other thing is just gonna later disguise actual offensive attempts. Here's an interesting sequence. So after a little while of those step-in feints, he's gonna start being more aggressive, putting his full body into him. And so that's one right there, that little, he feints with the jab a little bit too. So that's what I mean, full body with the legs, with his body language, and with his hands. But what he does something like that again, he does something like that again, and then it slowly, subtly transforms into a real attack. And the reason why Volk attacked is because he felt him pass into that range. So as soon as Ilia passes into that kickable range, Volk has that landmine. He's punishing him for even attempting to get in the range. But what was cool is Ilia feinted, and it slowly bled into a real attack. And then he's looking to catch Volk, and he actually does catch him a little bit with that right hand. And if you notice what Volk is doing, turning away, chin up in the air, trying to kind of like lead with his shoulder to defend. And so we're going to talk more about that as well. So notice the change in tempo after that first successful shot from Ilia. He's turning it up, more pressure, more feints, more aggression behind those feints, and more initiations of offense, like right here, good closing range. And he's just being more aggressive in general, but that pressure starting to build up. And so one of the things I was talking about earlier is the game plan revolving around kicks. Well, I think one of the reasons it revolves around kicks is because Volk probably knew he didn't want to box with Ilia. He was like, I know my strength is with my kicks, so I'm gonna keep him at range with the kicks, not allow him to get in range where he can do damage. And as Topuria closes the range, he taps that glove, and that's somewhat of a feint. But then this time when he closes range, he's looking to measure and enter and exchange. And Volk is just, his mustache getting grazed by that right hand as he's just barely getting out the way, and then that left hand coming through. And so another important thing is in this exchange, they're both moving their feet. So Volk was so successful escaping danger because his opponents would try and exchange with him, but he would be backing up and throwing. But now he has somebody that's following him and throwing. So it's not just a battle of hands, it's a battle of feet and positioning. And one of the things is that shoulder doesn't work. Him turning away doesn't work if he's not in the right angle, the right position to avoid those shots. And when he gets cornered, he doesn't have any options to escape with those angles, and that's why what happens later on happens. In the beginning of the video, I made that preface because defensive habits are a lot harder to change than offensive habits. Volk, we see Volk respond like this all the time, kind of like leaning back, turning away a little bit like Cyril Gahn. And it's relying on footwork and just that mastery of the game of inches. And Volk is a master at that game of just barely being out of position so that he can counter and stuff like that. But it relies on him being able to cut those angles with his feet. And he can only cut those angles with his feet when he is in open space. And to be clear, I think Volk won that first round. I think Volk did pretty good that first round. It's just when you have someone like Ilia, who's hunting and who's not affected by what Volk is doing. Ilia lost the first round, but a round is a battle in a war. And so despite losing a battle, the pressure that's accumulating, him slowly downloading range, him getting closer and closer with the right hand, him cutting off Volk, those small victories, I was like, uh-oh. I was watching this fight, I was like, ooh, this is interesting. And then in the second round, it gets even more interesting. Now remember how he would do that step in and lean in with his body with those feints. Well, he initiates his offense the same way, and so Volk doesn't get any time to react. That shoulder is down like how it normally is, and that just means right hand comes through, tags him. And now he's emboldened, so he's gonna continue. And he's grazing him with some of these shots, and some of these shots are just barely missing. And Volk is getting pushed further and further back from the center of the cage. And Volk is very, very good in these scenarios where it's a moving exchange. Angles are being taken. People are shifting positions. Volk is very good in those. He's very aware, very smart, and very crafty. And so I think that's a great moment from Volk. But when he can't move, that's what we're about to look at next. Here we get the first extended boxing sequence against the cage. The first extended boxing sequence. So Volk tries to jab, and similar to earlier, Ilia is trying to come over top, where he feints over top, actually goes to the body, and then he comes up top with the left hook that actually touches Volk, and Volk is probably surprised, and Volk is backing up like how he's been doing, but he's running out of real estate. And Ilia, what was he doing earlier? He wasn't just punching, he's advancing while punching, footwork with the hands. And so Volk is now cornered, and Volk is gonna try and look for opportunity to counter to get Ilia off of him, and he does that by trying to get that collar tie with his left hand. But look at Ilia's left hand. Ilia's left hand is not punching, it's framing, it's measuring. What is it measuring? Well, that right there. And so I kept saying, okay, Volk's shoulder is there to deflect or catch or, you know, knock that right hand off course. What happens if that shoulder isn't there? Well, that's what happens. And this shot right here, perfect, accurate. It's hard to get a more accurate shot than this. Literally directly on the chin. His whole face shifts. And after the Islam fight, people were like, oh, his chin is going, so on and so forth. There's no version of Volk that's able to eat that punch. No version of Volk is gonna survive that. And so he had that lead arm extended, shoulder wasn't there to guard the chin. Right hand came over top. He measured, he cornered him. He removed all the defensive tools Volk had, and he punished him and put him to sleep. I didn't expect this video to be as long as it is now, but I had fun, so that's all that matters. See you later, fight scientists. Immortality Serum out.